Chapter 4. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, I was prepared to depart. The trade city held no loose ends for me to tie up, as I had already rid myself of most of my belongings prior to boarding the starship. I was in the best position I had ever been in to venture off to unknown territories. Mac, still disapproving of my plans, granted me access to the files. I spent the majority of the day in the back rooms of Floor 38, scouring through intelligence files to refresh my memory and reviewing my own old reports from Shainsa and Dylon. He dispatched one of our non-human employees to acquire a dry towner's outfit and other necessary items for me to wear and carry in the old town. Although I would have preferred to go myself, I felt that I needed the practice. As I strolled through the pristine streets of Trantor Trade City, I couldn't help but feel a sense of loss. Years spent behind a desk had left me with a nagging suspicion that I had forgotten more than I could remember. But I couldn't let anyone know that Race Drake hadn't left Coruscant on the starship. I had to maintain my cover until I was ready to reveal myself. And when I did, I had to be in my Drytown disguise, a persona that had become second nature to me. I was on my way to the Magnuson home, where Julie was waiting for me. Most civil servants in the Empire come from Earth or nearby planets, and they either stay unmarried or marry locals. But Joanna Magnuson was one of the rare Earth women who had come out with her husband 20 years ago. There are two types of Earth women like that: those who make their homes a little bit of heaven or a little bit of hell. Joanna had chosen the former, making their house look like a slice of Earth had been transported to Coruscant. It was hard for me to reconcile living under a red sun and then coming inside to yellow light. But maybe I was the one out of step. I had gone native, immersing myself so deeply in the new world that I had lost touch with the old. Joanna greeted me warmly and led me to where Julie was waiting. "How is Julie?" I asked. "Better, I think," Joanna replied. "I put her to bed in Meta's room, and she slept most of the day. She'll be all right. I'll leave you to talk." As Joanna left us alone, I couldn't help but feel grateful for the Magnusons' kindness. Julie and I had come from Earth, our father having served as an officer on the old starship Landfall. When he died in a wreck off Procyon, Mac Magnuson had found me a job in intelligence because I spoke 4 of the Coruscant languages and frequented the Yigam with Lyric whenever I could. They had taken Julie in as their own, like a younger sister. But when Lyric and I had our falling out, and he came to take Julie away with him, it had hurt them deeply. Yet they had remained kind to me. As I sat down to talk to Julie, I was relieved to see some of the frozen horror melting away from her face. The woman in the room was still tense, but not hysterical anymore. It wasn't a big room, just one of the children's bedrooms. Even at the top of the Secret Service, a cop doesn't live too well on Terra's civil service pay scale, especially not with 5 kids. It looked like all 5 of the kids had taken the room apart, one at a time. I sat down on a too-low chair and said, "Julie, we don't have much time. I need to be out of the city before dark. I want to know about Lyric, what he does, what he's like now. Remember, I haven't seen him for years. Tell me everything, his friends, his amusements, everything you know. I always thought you knew him better than I did." Julie had a fidgety way of coiling the links of the chain around her wrists that made me nervous. "It's routine, Julie. Police work. Mostly I play by ear, but I try to start out by being methodical." She answered everything I asked her, but the sum total wasn't much, and it wouldn't help much. As I said, it's easy to disappear on Coruscant. Julie knew he had been friendly with the new holders of the great house on Shainsa, but she didn't even know their name. I heard one of the Magnuson children fly to the street door and return, shouting for her mother. Joanna knocked at the door of the room and came in. "There's a chak outside who wants to see you, Race." I nodded. "Probably my fancy dress. Can I change in the back room, Joanna? Will you keep my clothes here till I get back?" I went to the door and spoke to the furred non-human in the sibilant jargon of the Igam, and he handed me what looked like a bundle of rags. There were hard lumps inside. The chak said softly, "I hear a rumor in the Igam, Race. Perhaps it will help you. 3 men from Shainsa are in the city. They came here to seek a woman who has vanished, and a toy-maker. They are returning at sunrise. Perhaps you can arrange to travel in their caravan." I thanked him and carried the bundle inside. In the empty back room, I stripped to the skin and unrolled the bundle. There was a pair of baggy striped breeches, a worn and shabby shirt-cloak with capacious pockets, a looped belt with half the gilt rubbed away and the base metal showing through, and a scuffed pair of ankle boots tied with frayed thongs of different colours. There was a little cluster of amulets and seals. I chose 2 or 3 of the commonest kind and strung them around my neck. One of the lumps in the bundle was a small jar, holding nothing but the ordinary spices sold in the market, with which the average dry towner flavours food. I rubbed some of the powder on my body, put a pinch in the pocket of my shirt-cloak, and chewed a few of the buds, wrinkling my nose at the long, unfamiliar pungency. The second lump was a skein, and unlike the worn and shabby garments, this was brand new and sharp and bright, and its edge held a razor glint. I secured the weighty object in the clasp of my shirt-cloak, the only weapon I could risk carrying. The final item in the bundle was a wooden case, measuring around 9 by 10 inches. I slid it open to reveal a carefully divided interior, lined with sponge-like plastic. Nestled within were numerous slips of glass, as valuable as jewels on Coruscant. These were lenses, ranging from camera and microscope lenses to eyeglass lenses. Packed tightly together, there were almost 100 of them, cushioned by shock-absorbent material. They were my justification for travelling to Shainsa. In addition to trade necessities such as vacuum tubes, transistors, liquors, and finely crafted small tools, items manufactured on Trantor, such as lenses for cameras and binoculars, were worth their weight in platinum. Even in cities where Trantors had never set foot, these items commanded exorbitant prices, and trading in them was a privilege reserved for dry-towners. According to Julie, Lyricad had been a trader in fine wire and surgical instruments. Coruscant was not a mechanized planet and had never developed its own industrial system. The non-human psychology rarely led to technological advancements. I returned to the room where Julie was waiting. Upon catching a glimpse of myself in the full-length mirror, I was taken aback. The Trantor civil servant, who had appeared clumsy and uncomfortable in his ill-fitting clothes, had vanished. In his place stood a dry-towner, lean and scarred, who looked back at me with an expression of astonishment. Joanna spun around as I entered the room, and her face visibly paled. After regaining her composure, she let out a nervous giggle. "My goodness, Race, I didn't recognize you," Julie whispered. "Yes, I remember you better like that. You look so much like—" The door burst open, and Mickey Magnuson darted into the room. The chubby little boy, tanned by a Terra-type sunlamp, held a sparkling object that emitted tiny flashes of colour. I grinned at the child before realizing that I was already in disguise and likely an unsightly sight. Mickey recoiled, but Joanna placed her plump hand on his shoulder and spoke soothingly to him. Mickey toddled towards Julie, holding up the shining object as if it were something precious and beloved. Julie bent down and opened her arms, but her face suddenly twisted in distress as she snatched at the plaything. "Mickey, what is this?" He guarded it protectively behind his back. "Mine!" "Mickey, don't be naughty," Joanna scolded. "Please let me see," Julie coaxed, and he slowly revealed the object, still wary. It was an angled prism of crystal, star-shaped, set in a frame that could make the star spin like a solidopic. But every time it was turned, it displayed a new and amusing face. Mickey turned it round and round, delighted to be the center of attention. Dozens of faces appeared, human and non-human, all slightly distorted and dim. My own face, as well as Julie's and Joanna's, emerged from the crystal surface, not as reflections, but as caricatures. A choked sound from Julie made me turn in dismay. She had collapsed onto the floor and sat there, pale as a ghost, propping herself up with her hands. "Race! Figure out where he got that thing!" I bent down and shook her. "What's wrong with you?" I demanded. She had fallen into the same dazed, sleepwalking terror from earlier. She whispered, "It's not a toy. Rindy had one. Joanna, where did he get it?" She pointed at the shining object with a look of horror that would have been comical if it weren't so real, so full of fear. Joanna tilted her head to one side and furrowed her brow thoughtfully. "Well, I don't know now that you ask me. Maybe one of the chacks gave it to Mickey. Bought it in the bazaar, perhaps. He loves it. Get up off the floor, Julie." Julie scrambled to her feet. She said, "Rindy had one. It terrified me. She would sit and stare at it for hours, and, Race, I told you about it. I threw it away once, and she woke up screaming. She screamed for hours and hours, and she ran out in the dark and dug for it in the trash pile where I had buried it. She went out in the dark, broke all her fingernails, but she dug it out again. She stopped herself, staring at Joanna, her eyes wide with appeal. "Well, dear," said Joanna with gentle, reproachful kindness, "you don't need to be so upset. I don't think Mickey is so attached to it as all that. And anyway, I'm not going to throw it away." She patted Julie reassuringly on the shoulder, then gave Mickey a little shove toward the door and turned to follow him. "You'll want to talk alone before Race leaves. Good luck, wherever you're going, Race." She held out her hand forthrightly. "And don't worry about Julie," she added in a whisper. "We'll take good care of her." When I returned to Julie, she was standing by the window, gazing through the oddly filtered glass that turned the red sun into orange. "Joanna thinks I'm crazy, Race. She thinks you're upset. Rindy is an odd child, a true dry-towner, but it's not my imagination, Race, it's not. There's something—" Suddenly she burst into tears again. "Homesick, Julie? I was, a little, in the first few years, but I was happy, believe me." She turned her tear-streaked face towards me. "You have to believe that I never regretted it for a moment." "I'm glad," I said flatly. That made it all right. "Only that toy. Who knows? It might be a clue to something." The toy had reminded me of something too, and I tried to remember what it was. I had seen non-human toys in the EGAM, even bought them for Mac's kids. When a single man is frequently invited to a home with 5 children, it's the only way he can repay that hospitality, by bringing the children odd trinkets and knickknacks. But I had never seen anything quite like this one, until yesterday. The toy seller they had chased out of the EGAM, the one who had fled into the shrine of Nebran and disappeared. He had 6 of those prism and star sparklers. I attempted to conjure an image of the diminutive toy vendor in my mind, but my efforts were in vain. I had only caught a glimpse of him from beneath his hood. "Julie, have you ever laid eyes on a small man, resembling a chack but even smaller, contorted and hunchbacked? He peddles toys," I inquired. She appeared perplexed. "I don't believe so, although there are dwarf chacks in the polar cities. However, I am certain I have never encountered one," she replied. "It was just a thought," I responded. Nonetheless, it was something to ponder. A toy merchant had vanished. Prior to his disappearance, Lyric had destroyed all of Rindy's toys. The sight of a plaything crafted from expertly cut crystal had caused Julie to experience a fit of hysteria. "I should depart before nightfall," I stated. I secured the final clasp of my shirt cloak, adjusted my skein, and counted the funds Mac had provided for my expenses. "I aim to enter the Igam and locate the caravan en route to Shansa." "You're heading there first?" Julie inquired. "Where else would I go?" I retorted. Julie pivoted, placing one hand on the wall. She appeared frail and unwell, years beyond her age. Suddenly she flung her thin arms around me, and a link from the chain on her bound hands struck me with force as she cried out, "Race! Race! He'll murder you! How can I live with that on my conscience as well?" "You can endure a lot on your conscience," I responded. I firmly removed her arms from my neck. A link from the chain became entangled with the clasp of my shirt cloak, and something snapped within me once more. I grasped the chain with both hands and exerted a mighty heave, bracing my foot against the wall. The links broke apart. A loose end struck Julie beneath her eye. I ripped open the seals of the bejeweled cuffs, removed them from her arms, and hurled the entire apparatus into a corner, where it landed with a clatter. "Damn it!" I bellowed. "It's finished! You will never wear those restraints again!" Perhaps after 6 years in the dry towns, Julie was beginning to comprehend the significance of those 6 years chained to a desk. "Julie, I will locate Rindy for you, and I will bring Lyric back alive. But do not request anything more than that. Only alive. And do not inquire as to how." He would be alive when I finished with him. Of course he would be alive. Barely.